This video tutorial is going to be for the tile project, which shows you how to do a couple of things in Photoshop. It shows you how to set up a blank document for graphic design work or for layering multiple photographs into one document. And then it also shows you how to use layer adjustments that you don't typically use, as well as filters. So we are going to go up to File and New. Just open up Photoshop. Don't open up any photograph just yet. And we are going to change our title to the tile project. And we're going to set our dimensions. I already have mine set up to 8 inches for the width and 8 inches for the height. Make sure that your drop-down menu reads inches and not pixels. Make sure your resolution reads 300. This is going to give you a really optimal size for printing at a high quality. And then we're going to make our background white and click Create. And this is going to give us just a plain white square. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to put a photograph on top of this, and we're going to layer that in multiple times. So we're going to click File and Open, and we're going to get a photograph that we want to put in here. So I'm going to click on the desktop, and that's where my image is located. You're probably going to want to get yours from your photography drive, and then click Open. And what this ended up doing was opening up the photograph all by itself, okay? So from this tab right here, if I want to get this image on my blank document, I actually have to grab this little tab at the top and pull it down. And what happens when I do that is that a little thumbnail image will actually show up in the right-hand corner in my Layers panel. I'm going to click on that and drag and drop it onto my blank square. So at this point, my photo is really big. It's bigger than 8 inches by 8 inches, so I'm going to have to resize this down. There are two different ways that you can go about doing this. You can click Command-T on your keyboard, and that will pop up with the bounding boxes for you to scale, or you can go up to Edit, Transform, and Scale. Do not just scale this image from a corner willy-nilly. You need to hold Shift and then grab from a corner so that you maintain the correct proportions for your image. And what we want to try to do with this is we want to actually resize it so that about 9 can fit onto the square. So I think that this is actually going to be an okay size. Move it to the right a little bit. Click the check mark or click Return on your keyboard. And I have one resized photograph. So now what I need to do is I need to duplicate this 9 different times. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 versions of this one image. So I am going to go over to my Layers panel. I'm going to double click on Layer 1, and I'm going to name this Top Left, just to keep myself organized for whenever I am applying different adjustments to my layers. I'm now going to drag on this layer and drop it to my new page icon. And what you'll notice is that there are now 2 exact copies of that same image in the same location. So I'm going to go to the left and click on my Move cursor or my Move tool. And I'm going to move that top layer over and to the right. And this is now going to be my top middle photograph. I'm going to duplicate this process 9 times, so I'm going to drag this layer down to the new page icon. This is going to be my top right. I'm on this layer. I can now use my Move tool and move this over to the top right location. I'm going to make a copy of my top right from my Layers panel. We're now going to call this middle left, and we're going to click on this and drag it to the middle left. Copy of middle left. We'll rename this middle and move it to the middle. I'm going to keep doing this. Make a copy, move it over, rename, middle, right. Make a copy, move it over, rename it. This is going to be my bottom left now. Make a copy. Bottom middle. Make a copy. Bottom right. Okay, so now I have my 9 images in here. And what we're going to do at this point is we're going to apply adjustments and filters to each of these 9 layers that I have just created, okay? So I'm going to scroll down and I'm just going to start at my top left, and whatever layer that you have selected for your tile project is going to be the layer that your adjustment applies to. What is going to happen though is if I want to apply an adjustment just to this top left and I click on the gradient map, okay, it's going to apply to everything below my gradient map. So it actually just applied to my top left photograph, but it also applied to my background too. Let's throw this away and I'll show you what I mean a little bit more. If I click on my bottom right, which is at the very top of my layers panel, and I click on the gradient map, this gradient map has applied to every single layer below, and I actually just want it to apply to individual photographs. So there's a way to go about doing this. I'm going to go back to my top left. In your adjustments, there is a little drop-down menu. If you click on that drop-down menu, there's an adjustment called Clip to Layer, or it's really an option for adjustments that's called Clip to Layer. And when you have Clip to Layer selected, it only applies the layer adjustment that you click on to the photograph that you're on, or to the layer that you're on. So I'm going to click on Clip to Layer. So now when I click on any of these adjustments right here, that is only going to apply to the layer that I have selected in my layers panel right here. So I'm on my top left. I'm now going to start to apply these layer adjustments. And the first one I'm going to experiment with, and we're just going to experiment with 4 down here, which are the least, I would say the least commonly used adjustments. We're going to select invert. And you'll notice now, if I turn the eyeball off and on, that invert only applied to my top left. And there's a little arrow right here that shows you or explains that that invert is only applying to the photograph that's directly below it, okay? What invert does is it takes the colors in your image and it gives you the exact opposite of that. So that's what you're seeing demonstrated here. I'm going to now click on my top middle photograph and I'm going to apply posterize. And you'll notice that in the layers panel, if I turn my eyeball off and on, that has only applied to my top middle image. Okay, if I turn my top middle image off and on, okay, you'll see that go away and reappear. So posterize, what this does is it breaks your colors down in your image to basic black, white, blue, green, yellow, and red. And you can adjust the intensity of that by moving these sliders right here. Okay? Moving on now to the top right in my layers panel, I'm going to apply threshold. And threshold breaks your image down into black and white. If you move the slider to the left, it's going to eliminate the black tones in your image, and if you move it to the right, it's going to eliminate the white tones. Okay, so find a happy medium there. For your middle left, you're going to experiment with gradient maps. So I'm going to go up to the gradient map. What happened was this blue to green gradient map applied to my photograph, and it just applied from a transition to blue to green to the colors in my image. You can click reverse and that will switch the colors around. If you click this drop down menu right here, Photoshop has a lot of preset gradients that you can just use. So if you click on these, you'll notice that the only colors that are appearing in the image are the colors that are in the gradient map. If you do not like the colors that are showing up and you want to create your own, it's pretty simple. You go up to the gradient map and you just click on that, and the gradient editor will pop up, okay? So if I click on this purple right here, I can actually double click on it and select any color that I want to. So I can make it red, and that red will now apply to my photograph. I can add a color anywhere that I want to by clicking in this blank open space. So I'm going to click here, double click, and apply a yellow, for instance, and that yellow will now appear. And I can also change how far the fade is between colors by moving this diamond, all right? And then I can also erase a color if I want to. So say I didn't want this yellow at all, I could just click on it and pull down, and that would get rid of it from my gradient, okay? You can also adjust the smoothness if you want to, and the gradient type if you want to as well, okay? And you can just experiment with this as you please. And then click OK. All right. So there's that. So now moving on, we are going to experiment with various filters in Photoshop. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on our middle now, because we're done with the layer adjustments, and we're just going to experiment with filters. And the filters are located up in the top bar of Photoshop. You'll see filter. The ones that you are going to experiment with are from blur all the way down to stylize, okay? So I am going to go to blur for my middle, and I'm going to apply a motion blur. And what this does is it'll show you a preview. You can adjust the angle, so how do you want this blur to be applied, okay? And then you can also adjust the pixels, which is how far do you want the blur to occur, all right? So experiment with that and then click OK. You don't have to use the motion blur. You can use any of the blurs or anything from the blur gallery that you would like. For the middle right, I'm going to go to filter, I'm going to go to distort, and I'm going to experiment with wave. And what this is going to do is this is going to show you a little preview of how that's applied, so you can really kind of adjust that and you'll see that it starts to spread out. So just experiment with these little sliders right here to see what they do and click OK. All right, that really kind of distorts your image, which is pretty cool. If you go to the bottom left now, go up to your filter gallery again. I'm going to move down. Let's try something in noise. I'm going to add noise. I'm going to deliberately add grain. So if you use these magnifying glasses to zoom out, you can see a preview of your image in the lower right-hand corner or lower left-hand corner by just moving your magnifying glass out or zooming out. The amount is the percentage that the noise is applied to your photograph. So if it's up really high, it's going to be really noisy, and then if it's lower, it'll be a little bit more subtle. Okay. Moving on to my bottom middle. Filter. Let's go to Pixelate now, and Mosaic is one of my favorites. So I'm going to click on Mosaic. And what that does is it actually breaks it down into individual pixels, almost like a mosaic that you would see made out of glass. And you can pull down the cell size and reduce the number of squares that you have, or you can pull it up really high and make it look almost abstract. Okay. And then bottom right, I'm going to click on and go to Filter, and I am going to experiment with lens flare. This is really fun. So lens flares are actually really popular in photography now, and it's just the way that your lens is capturing light when you're taking a photograph. So sometimes you'll accidentally get this in your photograph. People try to deliberately get these in, so it's a gift if that ends up happening. So my light source is over to the right, so I'm going to put it over to the right. You can change the type of lens flare that you get. And then you can also adjust the brightness of it as well. And then click OK. And there's that. So now I have filters and layer adjustments that are applied to all of my photographs here, okay? So the very last thing that I want you to do for this is I want you to make your background a certain color or a gradient. It's up to you. So very last thing you're going to do is you're going to scroll down and you're going to select your background, which is that white square, okay? Over in your art tools on the left side, you are going to see, if you click the paint bucket, okay, you're going to see a gradient tool and a paint bucket tool. If you click on the paint bucket tool, the main swatch right here is going to be whatever color is applied to your photograph once you click on the white background. So if I click, that gray blue is going to apply to my background. I find that it's better to kind of pull in a color from your tile to tie it all together. So if you hold down Option on your keyboard, you can select a color from your actual tile project and then regular click to apply it. And now that blue from my leaves applied to my entire document. So Option, this little eyedropper tool which selects colors for you will pop up. And I like this green, and I'm going to click regular click, and that will apply to my background. Okay. If you want to as well, you can also apply a gradient, which is also where the paint bucket tool is located. It's called the gradient tool. And you can create a gradient or select a gradient that Photoshop has. You can change the way the gradient is applied, and you just click and swipe to apply that gradient. So I had this kind of teal, or I guess this is more of like a lime green to like a tealish forest green. And then I had this straight up and down transition for the gradient. And so when I swipe that, that is how the gradient is applied. Okay. If I have the circular gradient selected and I swipe, a circle will be created. If I select this almost like striped effect, you'll get a stripe effect, okay? And again, you can change this however that you would like to. You can change the color of the gradient, or you can just keep it a solid background. It's completely up to you. I'm gonna go back. I like this solid transition, okay? And that is the tile project. So once you're finished, go ahead and save it, and you have learned how to layer a photograph into Photoshop multiple times, use layer adjustments that you wouldn't typically use and apply them to just one single photograph, and then to also use filters.